Y'all thought y'all were getting out of here, didn't you? Surprise! You're still here. Now let me rap for you. No, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name is Jane Adams, and I'm a policy analyst at Bread for the World. I work on federal criminal justice policy, and I'm really happy to be here today and share with you my insights on racism, criminal justice reform, and what we're collectively called to do as advocates. I think there's maybe one up here. So one thing I want to share with you, and one thing that you should know about me, is that I am Southern. I am very, very Southern. You might not be able to tell because I definitely don't have an accent, but I'm about as Southern as it gets. I'm a 9th generation Alabamian. 9. Yeah, Alabama, some Alabama in the front. It's about to get real bad for us. Essentially, my family has lived in Alabama since the 1800s. On my family tree, you'll find names like Maud and Tryphosa and Letitia. And yes, maybe there were the occasional relatives who married other relatives. It's Alabama, you know? Sorry. It's just a fact. Can't help who my family is. But I want to talk to you about the most amazing woman in my life who had the most amazing Southern accent. It was so Southern, it almost sounded British. I can't really explain it, so I'll just play it for you. So this is a recording of my grandmother talking about what it was like for her to move to New York to serve in the Navy during World War II. Oh no. There we go. Play. Oh goodness. Okay, I was worried this would happen. Let me interpret her. I'm just kidding. My grandmother has an incredibly Southern accent. Very, very thick, very, very Southern. And I loved my grandmother. She was a really special person to me. She always told the best stories and was there for me when I needed her the most. When I got bullied at school, and that happened quite a bit, my grandmother would say things to me like, "Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will always hurt you." I'd always heard that adage before, but not in the way that she said it. My grandma believed in kindness, and she knew that what we say to one another can hurt or heal. And yet, if I were to Google my grandmother's name right now, this very moment, the first thing that would come up would be this. This is an article quoting my grandmother celebrating Confederate Flag Day. And if I kept searching, I would find articles about my grandmother's engagement in the United Daughters of the Confederacy and how she donated money to erect these Confederate monuments. And if I kept digging through my family tree, I'd find stories about my family supporting segregation, participating in lynchings, supporting the laws that led to mass incarceration, fighting for the Confederacy, and then I'd eventually get to the evidence of how my family owned hundreds of slaves. How is it the same charming woman, my grandmother, who taught me kindness, participated in and perpetuated racism and racist institutions? What do I do with this legacy I inherited? My heritage is rife with racism, and I am complicit in it. I've been in a Black neighborhood and locked the car doors, thinking that I would be at more risk there than I would be in my own neighborhood. My people, my kin, myself, I perpetuated and participated in racist systems of oppression. That's a reality I cannot escape. Each day I try to reconcile and repent with it, to do the work to confront my past by changing my present oppression. And I change the present through a commitment to justice and advocacy. It is not enough to just struggle with the past of my family. I must confront the present realities of racism. and how they are harming millions of families. This is how I pay reparations, with my time, my money, and my advocacy. Tomorrow, many of you will go to the halls of Congress and advocate to your elected officials for the need for criminal justice reform. And in my opinion of working on criminal justice advocacy for the past 2 or so years, I can tell you that America's criminal justice system is our most obvious example of racism and the racism that infiltrates this society. Our criminal justice system is broken. The inequities in the system are stark and they are alarming. I'm quite certain that most of you have heard that the United States is only 5% of the world's population, but has 25% of the world's inmates. In fact, rates of incarceration have soared since the early 1980s, even though crime has not. And the reason rates of incarceration have soared is because of mandatory minimum sentences, especially drug crime mandatory minimums. Various Catholic leaders, like the bishops and the Society of Jesuits, have described mandatory minimum sentences as inherently flawed because they limit a judge's ability to look at the individual person and his or her circumstances when deciding a sentence. They are a rubber stamp for racist injustice. And in America, justice is not blind. It isn't. If you've heard that, it's wrong. It's very aware of a person's race. Our justice system disproportionately locks up Black and brown people. And in fact, when a defendant is African American, studies have shown that prosecutors are twice as likely to pursue charges that carry mandatory minimum sentences. Raise your hand if anyone in here was born in 2001. Anybody? My goodness. I know it's stunning. All the old people are cringing. Okay, calm down. Put your hands down. Actually, no, keep your hands up. 2001. Look around you. In 2001, Black men born in 2001 have a 1 in 3 likelihood of going to jail at some point in their life. 1 in 3. Compare that to the rates of whites. You can see it up there. And you can see that the system is broken, and it favors white people like me. The effects of mass incarceration are far-reaching, and the system as is poses significant barriers to ending hunger and poverty. When parents are taken out of their homes due to harsh sentencing guidelines, the children suffer. And according to one study, almost 70% of households reported having difficulty meeting basic needs like food and housing after a family member was incarcerated. America has an addiction to locking people behind bars, and it is long past time to fix this problem. Tomorrow, many of you will have the opportunity to speak truth to power when you advocate to your members of Congress. And I want you to know that to advocate, to speak truth to government, is a Catholic social teaching principle that goes all the way back to St. Paul, using his Roman citizenship to advocate on behalf of the prisoners he was jailed with. This is the right to participate. To speak truth to government officials is sacred, and it is foundational in being a member of the church. If you aren't doing it, you aren't being a Christian. It's just the truth. Now, I'd like for you to raise your hand if you're participating in the Advocacy Day tomorrow. Go on. Woo, good Lord. Thank you, Jesus. If your hand is raised, I want to thank you. And I also just want to be brutally honest with you. Your commitment could change the course of the nation's history. I cannot express how pivotal this moment is for criminal justice reform. Right now, Congress is making big decisions about the future of our justice system. Somewhere a few miles away, the people in power, the people who are supposed to represent your interests, are determining whether we reverse course in our addiction to prison or whether we press on with the oppression of the poor and vulnerable. This May, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a prison reform bill that was a good first step, but not nearly enough to overhaul the system. The good news is that the Senate wants to do even more than prison reform. Republicans and Democrats in this divided democracy have found commonality by working together to enact reforms to our criminal justice system, and they want to enact mandatory minimum sentencing reforms, which, by the way, have ballooned mass incarceration and the federal budget. In fact, in September, President Trump expressed a willingness to consider adding even more criminal justice reforms to the prison reform bill that passed the House. But he said he wouldn't consider that kind of bill until after the election. Well, guess what Tuesday is? It's the election, that's right. Which means that when Congress gets back in just a week or so, they're going to be thinking about issues like criminal justice reform. Now has never, it's the most important time. Last year we worked on criminal justice reform and somebody got up here and they said this is the time. But the articles are there. They're thinking about it, they're debating about it, and they want to pass it. But in order for Congress to take time, consider, debate, and vote on comprehensive policies, they need to know that this issue matters to their constituents, which would be you. And I cannot express how important it is. We might be on the cusp of seeing sweeping changes that unlocks the prison doors for thousands that have been put there because of unfair sentencing policies. Now, my good friend, Mr. Quincy, said that solving mass incarceration is not basically an economic or political problem, it's an ethical problem. Ignoring those who are incarcerated, leaving their families behind, allowing the criminal justice system to lock away decades of Black and brown families is an ethical problem. We will never end mass incarceration if we do not step up and show the people in power that we care about the human beings that are locked behind bars and that their sentence and their incarceration does not define them as a person. Catholic social teaching states that everyone has God-given dignity and deserves to be treated with respect. And I gotta tell you, mandatory minimum sentencing has violated that teaching by deepening racial inequality and exacerbating structural poverty for many, especially people of color. It is a legacy that is just as racist as the racism that my family inhabited. Any reform to our nation's criminal justice system must start with the restoration of dignity for those involved. Pope Francis, he called on us to bring good news to people who are incarcerated and to encounter each other. And I just gotta say, I think the best good news we can bring is to see comprehensive criminal justice reform passed out of Congress and signed into law by the President. So tomorrow, when you meet with members of Congress and their staff, make sure to do the following things. Share your story. Do you have a story like mine? Probably not, 9 generations of Alabama, but you probably have struggled with racism and you've probably done racist things. And you now know how the criminal justice system perpetuates racism. But maybe your story isn't like mine. Maybe you're a person of color and have experienced racism. If you feel called, share. Number 2, always ask for what you want, not what you think you can get. It's not your job to negotiate a criminal justice deal. It's your job to ask for what you want to see changed. Congress isn't going to give you everything you want, but it's important for them to know what you want. Number 3, remind them of your faith. It's okay to talk about Jesus, and it's okay to talk about Catholic social teaching, and it's okay to talk about the Pope in your meetings. I always encourage people who are talking to their elected officials to find a biblical story or a quote by a faith leader that inspires them and then share it. And number 4, remind them that you care and that you vote. Believe it or not, most members of Congress want to know what voters in their state or district care about. The fact that you care about ending mass incarceration will mean a lot to many offices. Now, I'd be a really bad lobbyist if I didn't share what you should say when you're in these offices. So here are some quick things to remember. Make sure to ask the staff person if your member of Congress will support and vote for legislation that enacts criminal justice reform. Make sure to make the ask. If you don't make the ask, you've left the meeting without them knowing what to do next. Number 2, make sure to ask the staff person if the member of Congress will call on their own party leadership, Republican or Democrat, to make criminal justice reform a priority not only in this Congress, but in the next one. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but party leadership decides what bills go on the floor. You could tell your member of Congress all day you care about criminal justice reform, but until their leadership cares about criminal justice reform, it'll never see the light of the halls of Congress. So I've really enjoyed my time with you. I'm really bummed you didn't get to hear my grandma's fantastic Southern accent. Try it again. You can come see me and I will play it for you. It's fantastic. But I'm honored to be here. Bread for the World, the organization I work for. Who's heard about Bread for the World before? Yeah? Woo, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome. Bread for the World, the organization I work for, would be pleased to have you visit our booth where we have resources about mass incarceration available. Or you could simply text BREAD to 738-674. It's on the bottom of the screen to learn more. And I'll be at the booth after this to answer your questions and to speak with you. Thank you so much.